Gutierrez, this show's host, and next to me is the founder and the creator of the Lewis Approach verbal system, Chuck Lewis. The name of this show is You Are Not Mentally Ill. Today we live in a society full of pressures and demands. There are always things placed upon us to do, problems to solve, and more. Sometimes it may feel like we are literally going crazy and we have mental illness. But here on this show, we're here to tell you, you are not mentally ill, which is the name of our show. We say mental illness does not exist. Chuck Lewis is going to tell you why. All you really need to do is to solve life's problems and to get your needs met. The goal of our show is to cover specific topics in the general field of mental health and to tell you why these are not mental health issues, illnesses, but life's problems, and then tell you about a tool that will help you solve them like no other. Topics we'll cover on our show include domestic violence, bullying, chronic stress, spousal abuse, PTSD, even suicidal thoughts. Before we get started today on today's juicy subject, let me tell you what you can expect to get out of this show. We're not going to lecture you here. We're going to tell you in detail with specifics about the Lewis Approach, how it works, and even teach you some of it so you can begin to use parts of it in your life right away. It is a revolutionary verbal technique that enables you to be able to solve these life's problems simply and quickly. It is not therapy, nor is it counseling. It is a tool you use to get your needs met. And when you do that, you are able to better solve life's problems and stay mentally fit and healthy. Today's topic is going to be slightly off one of the other topics, but spot on with what's going on right now in the news. Why police officers use excessive force, and it's not race motivated, and how we as a society can solve this problem. Before I introduce you to Chuck Lewis, let me give you a summary of my brief background. I'm a member of Assistance League of San Bernardino. I've been in PTA, PTSA, I'm a philanthropist, been a co-host at a radio show, and I've done many, many things in the community. And I'm also took a class from Chuck Lewis on how to get my needs met and read a book on getting what you want and being liked for it, which is an amazing book. It changed my life. So, but enough about me. Let me introduce to you Chuck Lewis and have him tell you about his background and his experience.
Nancy, that was really impressive. I tell you. Let me tell you about me. I'm a sociologist, I'm MSW, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm a board-certified diplomat in clinical social work, and I'm with the Academy of Certified Social Workers. I worked for the state of California and the County of Los Angeles Departments of Mental Health for over 44 years. I was also a field instructor for UCLA and USC. And I had a private practice I ran for years, working with the most severely disturbed and violent people in the community in Los Angeles and LA County. And I did that because no other therapist wanted to work with them. And I believe that anybody with a problem should be treated, and that's why I started my practice. In addition to that, I worked with my son to write a book entitled Getting What You Want and Being Liked for It, How to Resolve Conflicts, Problems, and Situations with anyone about anything. Additionally, we wrote a booklet entitled The Magic Word of the Lewis Approach. So it's a little booklet you can carry around and use them as you need to.
Also, I'd like to mention that they have a website at www.lewisapproach.com. Chuck, how did you come up with the title for today's show?
So how we came up with the title, when I was in graduate school, I studied about psychiatrist Dr. Thomas Szasz. In 1950, he began to look into mental illness as a disease. And in 1961, he wrote a book entitled The Myth of Mental Illness, and said that mental illness does not exist at all. He further looked into it and found out that there's no blood tests, no EEGs, no x-rays, no other test that can determine the biological cause of mental illness. So he further went into it and found out that the therapist who did the diagnosing made the diagnosis based on what a patient would tell them, the answer that the patient gave them. Now, many times that could be false information or misunderstanding of information, so the diagnosis can be totally wrong. In addition to that, therapists, what they do is they use a coercion with the patient. They don't work with them to determine what the cause of the problem is really, but they insist on the patient accepting their interpretation.
That's very interesting, Chuck, and a great way to explain to our viewers today. I am sure that they appreciate it. The title of our show today is Why Police Officers Use Excessive Force, and it's not race motivated, and how we can solve this problem. Chuck, why do police officers use excessive force with some people and other times end up killing them? Is it really race motivated?
You know, a lot of people believe that the police is race motivated for the violence and the shooting and the killings, but it's not race motivated. It's hormone motivated. The fight or flight hormone. When the fight or flight part gets to a certain pitch, there's going to be violence. It has something to do with the old brain and the new brain. The old brain is a fight or flight. All they do is fight. It protects you and keeps you alive. For example, if you cut your hand, it's going to send a clotting there to keep you from bleeding to death. And so that's what it does. Now let me go on and point out more about how the hormone is not race motivated. If you're walking down the street and you walk past a dog, and you just keep walking, the dog will just lie there, won't do anything. But if you walk by the dog and you start running, the dog will run after you, see? And it's similar to what happens when a police officer stops someone. They're trying to retain them, and the person's trying to get away. And so the police officer runs when they run. That's how
Wow,
it
you know,
works.
that is a great way to explain it. What could people do, especially African Americans, to protect themselves from the police officers that may want to harm them if these hormones are released or even kill them?
Well, we have a tool that, when they use this tool, it works very effectively. It's called the 3 don'ts and the 3 do's. Now let me point out the 3 don'ts. The first don't is don't ask or answer questions. That's the first don't. Don't ask and don't answer questions. The second don't is don't use the words want, need, or please. That's the second don't. Don't use the words want, need, or please. And the third don't is don't use the word you as the focus of your discussion. If you think about it, you'll see that all of those words, all of those things we're talking about, if you do them, it's going to increase the stress level in yourself and the officer too. Then there's the 3 do's. Very simple. What you do is you decide what you want, clearly and specifically as you can. And you put it in an instructional statement and tell the person to do that for you. And then immediately you follow. That's the second. The first don't do is to decide what you want. The second one is you put it in an instructional statement. And the third do is you immediately say, I'd appreciate that. And when you use those, you will find that you will end up less stressed and without a problem.
Wow, that is so interesting. Let's run through an example for our viewers so they can get an idea. Let's say an African American person is stopped by a police officer, and the officer comes up to them and says, "So, where are you headed this evening?" For the person to follow the first don't, which is to not ask or answer questions, what should the person do to do the Lewis approach?
What a person would do is, first place, you follow the first don't, and that is, you don't ask or you don't answer a question. And the second one is you're going to tell them what to do. So you say, I heard what you said. Tell me why you asked that question. I'd appreciate it. That's how the person would deal with that.
Wow, so this is the key to making you stay safe. What if the police officer says, well, I saw you make a turn about 300 feet back without stopping at the stop sign, so I was just wondering if you needed assistance. How would you answer that?
Again, remember, you don't ask and don't answer questions.
Okay.
So when they say that, you say, I heard what you said. tell me when you saw me make the turn. I'd appreciate that. And that's how you deal with that.
That is so cool. Yes, I can clearly see how that works and how brilliant that is. Now, what about the other side of the coin? What about the police officers? Is there any way that we can help them, that they can use the Lewis approach when they stop someone? Is there some way that they could do that?
Yes, what they could do is they use the Lewis approach. When the officer stops a person, and let's say if the person is resisting, they would just say, follow what I'm asking you to do. I'd appreciate that. They tell what actually to do for them, is what they do. Now, if the police officers would follow the three don'ts and three do's,
Yes.
then you wouldn't have the death of like George Floyd and Rashad Brooks and all the other people that's been shot, unarmed people that were shot. That's what would happen, because the officer and the victim, because it takes two people to have this violence to happen, neither one of them would have that level of stress that would cause a violence to happen.
Okay, so let's run through another example. Let's say an officer stops someone who happens to be an African American and says the same thing from the previous example. So, where are you headed this evening? Let's say the person says, "Why are you harassing me, cop?" What should the officer say to use the Lewis approach, like you said?
Again, he has to remember to use the don'ts and the do's. So you don't answer the question. You would say, I heard what you said, tell me why you said that. I'd appreciate that. That's the way he would respond to it. Now, if you notice that it doesn't increase the stress in the person he's talking to, and it doesn't increase the stress in the officer, because what it does is it uses up the stress hormones. That's what it does.
Okay, so what if this person was being belligerent and said, "Why are you always picking on me, cop?" and started to pick a fight with the cop? What would you recommend they do then?
You know what, Nancy, this is one of the typical things that people do when they ask questions. It's basically a fight. So they may say more than what you just said. They may say, "Why are you stopping me? You know I'm black. You're picking on black people." So what the officer would say, hold your question. Ask me that later. In the meantime, let's go back to why you made that turn. And that's how you deal with that.
Wow, yeah, I think our viewers can clearly see the unique benefits of how the Lewis approach can keep officers from killing people and from people saying and doing things that might harm them. It's not race, but it's rather science. It's the old brain and the new brain, and how this Lewis approach gets that to work so that no one gets hurt. I know how I got started learning the Lewis approach, but Chuck, can you tell us how someone else could get a hold of someone so that they could learn how to do the Lewis approach?
Yes, it's very simple. All they need to do is call Charles Lewis at phone number area code 818-599-0016, or they can email him at charles@lewisapproach.com. And then finally, if you want more information, you go to www.lewisapproach for more information. It's really important to kind of do that because you can learn even more by doing these calls.
Wow, that was such a great topic, Chuck. What topic do you have lined up for next week?
You know, I like this topic because did you know, I think you mentioned earlier, that over 1.32 million people were affected by domestic violence in 1 year.
I know, it's
1
crazy.
year. And so our topic is going to be how to stop domestic violence in 3 simple steps. And it's going to be that simple to do.
Wow, that sounds really, really interesting. Our viewers, I'm sure, are going to want to see that. Our shows are released on Tuesdays, so if you'd like to be notified when they're released, there are 2 ways to be notified. First, you can email john@lewisapproach.com, or you can call and we will let you know when it is released at 818-599-0016, and we will text you when the show is released. Until next time, remember, you are not mentally ill. All you have to do is to learn how to solve life's problems and use the Lewis approach, and it can do that for you quickly and simply.